Yeah, Garfield. President Garfield. I had that little segment there that was from Freedom First Films YouTube page, which you can look from. The film is called Shadow and Darkness, and that was an excerpt of it, going into actually up to a few further points up to McKinley. Interestingly enough, he said he had a speech there. That was McKinley's speech. Was try to basically sell the American people on, you know, having this again, the honor of the government, using the, you know, Civil War as an analogy for the, that was for the, you know, preservation of the United States, and now this conflict, the War of 1898, the Spanish-American War, was for the honor, the financial honor of the government. Interestingly enough, very similar analogies to 9/11, but we're talking about Garfield. So Garfield was the 20th president of the United States. He was a reformer. What I mean by that is there was a lot of corruption in government at the time, and there were a couple of presidents that actually tried to do something about it and got some things done. I mean, basically, you know, there were a lot of Christians, and they were, you know, like, you know, Bible-thumping presidents, you know, like Rutherford B. Hayes, and then you got Chester A. Arthur, who was just a criminal, who was, so that whole period of time had a lot of different things going on with it. But Chester Arthur, as you heard in the previous segment, he had a great job. He was making 10 grand. Imagine that, making $10,000 a year back in, I guess it was in the 1880s. That's just insane, right? Tremendous amount of money back then. He was the collector of the Port of New York back then. That's how they used to collect taxes. The Federal Reserve System changed all of that, but we could really change it back. The idea of the whole tax structure changed to give the power to these elite banksters. So understand that the system at that point, they were moving towards the Federal Reserve. They were moving towards the world government, continuing to do that, to get rid of this type of tariff system that they had. It was a very, very, you know, well-crafted plan, because before the country was funded fine. We didn't need a Federal Reserve. Are you kidding? We didn't need any. We don't need any. We still don't need a Federal Reserve. We never needed a Federal Reserve. That's the big lie. And McKinley was a good example as well. I mean, you know, listen to just what happens with history. He was a proponent of sound money, and that's really what we need: sound money. You know, money that's actually sound. He was leery of this whole concept that they were cooking up, which ended up becoming the Federal Reserve. And he died. He was shot by Koljoff, I think his name was. I can't pronounce his name. He's Kolchev. It's a strange name. Some Czech guy. Anyway, but we're talking about Garfield. So Garfield was killed by Charles Guiteau, who was a really freaky type of dude, and again, like sort of like a hippie of his time. I mean, the Oneida Society is very similar to the, you can look at it as being like the free love movement of the 60s, because they were like, they called it perfectionism, where they believed that Jesus Christ had already come, he'd already risen, he'd risen, of course, he had always returned, you know, as per the scriptures, in the year 70. So we were living in Revelation or whatever, and been free from sin and all of that, because I don't know, they were just sort of like a little freaky. And they had very unorthodox sex practices. It's like really weird. I'll go over that a little bit in a while. But first, Garfield was the 20th president of the United States, and he was born on November 19th, which is, of course, today, 1831, in Orange Township, Cayuga County, Ohio. Hey, by, like the Pretenders, Chrissy Hind, Cayuga Falls. So she's from there. Anyway, he was a teacher. He was a public official. Of course, his political party was Republican. He was also a minister. And as one of the last of the log cabin presidents, James A. Garfield attacked political corruption and won back for the presidency a measure of prestige it had lost during the Reconstruction period, which was very corrupt. Johnson, oh my God, very corrupt. It goes on and on. If you study American history, and you should, because most people just don't, you'll see that they execute things over and over again. This is not really like a funny thing. These bankers have been pulling this shit off. It's all the bankers, by the way. There's no need for war. There really is absolutely, when you break it down, no need for war. No need for war, except if you're literally attacked by an aggressor, then that's different. But otherwise, these other things, let's get freedom, let's save this and save that, and it's all, you talk about a big budget movie. It's a big budget movie, ladies and gentlemen. It's a big budget movie that we pay for. There's no need for it. You protect yourselves. If somebody attacks you, that's fine. We don't have to be all over the world to stop people from attacking us. We cause more anger and hatred than we defend. So bear that in mind as well. So Garfield was, of course, a pacifist. He didn't like war. He didn't like the fact that the Federal Reserve people were trying to get the Federal Reserve under Garfield. He made a very famous speech, which you heard, that I put an excerpt of, and talked about the bankers, whoever controls the money. You understand why there's inflation and depression, and where these things originate. He was a wise man. He was a good Christian person. Not to say that Christians are any better than anyone else, because it don't matter what your religion is. I don't care if you have a religion. Well, it doesn't matter. I think religion's a big problem personally. I think religions cause a lot of problems because it causes division. I think everybody should have faith in whatever they have, and that be it. So that said, this guy born in Cayuga County, Ohio, in 1831, was fatherless at age 2, and he drove canal boats. Imagine that. Back then they had canal boats. He drove canal boats and somehow earned enough money for an education. He was graduated from Williams College in Massachusetts in 1856, and he returned to the Western Reserve Eclectic Institute, which was later called Hiram College in Ohio, as a classics professor. Okay, so he became a teacher. Good. Within a year, he made it to president. Wow. It's amazing. Garfield was elected to the Ohio State Senate. He was president of the college, that's it. Garfield was elected to the Ohio State Senate in 1859 as a Republican, and during the secession crisis, he advocated coercing the secession states back into the Union. After the war, at the 1880 Republican Convention, Garfield failed to win the presidential nomination for his friend John Sherman. And finally, on the 36th ballot, Garfield himself became the dark horse nominee. Ooh, how scary. How literally omnipresently scary. And so, what's the word? Foreshadowing is of doom. I don't know. Pretty scary. So he was the dark horse. And by a margin of only 10,000 popular votes, oh God, Garfield defeated the Democratic nominee, General Winfield Scott Hancock. Now, this is important. This is one of the reasons why, you got to understand what happens, how he fell into the globalist hands perfectly by dying. Maybe it was like, just by sheer luck that, my studying and understanding of history has that this guy was a real nut that shot him. Guiteau. And we're going to go into Guiteau in a minute. But the CIA, it's like a similar type of guy. It's like a psychological, you know, weirdo that they use. Now, they could have modeled their entire psychological profile of like the type of person that they mind control these days with all their, you know, Cameron's, Dr. Ewan Cameron's experiments. Hello?
Yeah, what's poppin'? Informed?
This is Informed Radio, yes. It's, We Are Change. Who's calling?
What's going on? How it is? Well, I'm down here at Connie Park. We got Occupied Building 7 going on here. Well, since there is no Building 7, I don't know why they blew it out. I'm here at the fucking park here with the popo. And someone said to call in when we get down here.
Okay. Yeah, this is Howard Nema. You're on the air, like live worldwide, actually, sir. Yeah.
Oh, it's really excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'm down here at the park.
Okay.
This called stuff. And I don't know. We got some people here with cameras and stuff like that. They're not a sparse crowd compared to how it was. But they're putting up Christmas lights here, make it all nice. I guess, and, but, I don't know, I think, you know, they said, anyone who's down here to call in, so.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. What was your name again? What was your name again?
Well, Robert. My name is Robert.
Hi, Robert, I'm Howard Nema. Anyway, so what's going on down there? Is everyone's just, like, putting up Christmas tree lights? You're kidding me, right? So they're gonna, like, hang out for Christmas?
Horse people. I mean, you know, whatever, they got the little ladder box, you got all the
I see. Yeah.
And, you know, like, I see a few about protesters, yeah, but that's about it. Like, there ain't no food, there ain't no, the library is long gone. Like, it's a skeleton crew compared to the way it was. There's maybe like, I don't know, 100 people here compared to the like 500, the 700 that would be here on a regular Saturday.
Yeah. So what's the police presence? Is there a big police presence there?
Not really, to tell you the truth. There's hardly any police. They got all the park is like barricaded. There's only like certain entrances or exits you can get in. So there's a lot less police and a lot more barricades. I mean, they're locked up upset everybody up. You know what I'm saying? Everyone's like on the street or in jail right now trying to get their shit. They don't need too many cops here. You know, everyone's in lockdown, all like scrambling to find their jackets and coats and boots and shoes. You know, I mean, they came in and tore shit up. It's definitely a totalitarian police regime down here. The park looks so sad now compared to how it used to be. I mean, you have all these like loving people and free books, and free music, and free food. Now everyone's walking around with like their head down. It's really sad. It's really sad what they did.
Wow. All right, so it looks like it's sort of like breaking up almost, you know?
Well, for today, like Saturdays and Sundays are always the best days to come out because we have a lot of like school kids and a lot of people bring their children down here.
Really? They're bringing their people are bringing their children
on every Saturday and Sunday. And now there's like hardly anybody here. It's like really depressing.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry to hear that, Robert. Sorry to hear that.
But we're hanging out the honors here, and we're handing out pamphlets for the architects and engineers. And we got our poster boards and stuff. But it really is kind of sad. The architect crew compared to what used to be here.
Wow.
Kind of in a way.
Well, at least, yeah. I guess you can hand out some stuff there. So, which chapter are you from? We're Change. Which chapter?
We are New York City, of course.
Oh, New York City. Yeah. Okay. Of course. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm just. No, I didn't know. We don't. We're sovereign and autonomous. You know what I'm saying? Oh, absolutely. Hey, listen. To tell you the truth, I represent. Actually, I'm co-founding of We Are Change Connecticut, but I'm from New York, man. I grew up in New York. It's my hometown. Yeah, Garfield. President Garfield. I had that little segment there that was from Freedom First Films YouTube page, which you can look from. The film is called Shadow and Darkness in Government. Interestingly enough, very similar analogies to 9/11, but we're talking about Garfield. So Garfield, that was an excerpt of it, going into actually up to a few further points up to McKinley. Interestingly enough, he said he had a speech there. That was McKinley's speech. Was try to basically preservation of the United States, and now this conflict, the War of 1898, the Spanish-American War, was for the honor, the financial honor of sell the American people on, having this, again, the honor of the government, using the, Civil War as an analogy for that was for the,